In this video, I'm going to talk about the reality of getting guitar lessons versus teaching yourself to play guitar. I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of each, as well as give my honest thoughts. And then at the end, I'm going to explain what I would do if I was an absolute beginner and I wanted to progress as quickly as possible. I've taken lessons and taught myself on and off throughout my entire guitar playing journey, and I've been playing paid gigs for about the past 4 years. So I think I have a unique position here where I can offer some value. So let's start with teaching yourself. The main way that people do this these days is on the internet and via YouTube. There's plenty of resources out there. There's still some people who do this via books, but either way, there's some pros and cons that I think apply no matter how you're doing it. Let's start with the pros. First of all, usually, especially in the case of YouTube, it's free. Lessons can be expensive, and teaching yourself online usually isn't. Another pro is there is a ton of content out there. Everything you could possibly ever want to learn on guitar is already available on YouTube. There's nothing a guitar instructor could possibly teach you that isn't already out there. There are no gatekeepers to any of this information anymore. It's just available for free now. Another pro is you can go at your own pace. Sometimes instructors can limit you to the pace that they want to move at, that they think you should be moving at. A big advantage to teaching yourself is you can go at your own pace. If you have a bunch of time available a certain week, you want to practice for hours and hours a night, you can do that. If you don't have much time the next week, if you only want to practice for 15 minutes or you have to skip a day or two altogether, you can move at your own pace. It's not a big deal. There are some cons to teaching yourself though. First of all, and primarily, there's no direction. There's nobody to explain to you exactly what you should learn in what order. There's a lot of topics on YouTube. It's hard to put them together in any sort of cohesive curriculum that'll actually move you through the topics one after another. Another con is that there's no accountability. There's nobody to hold you accountable for what you're supposed to learn last time and to stop you from moving on until you've mastered the subject that you were supposed to master previously. It can be really hard to overcome this. Willpower alone, for most folks and for me, usually isn't enough. I, and most people I would argue, need somebody to hold them accountable. I want to talk about a quick side note. For the cons of teaching yourself, most people would say that you don't learn the proper technique. They would say that if you learn improper technique early on, it could hinder your progress going forward because it can be hard to correct those mistakes in the future. Personally, I've never dealt with any of this. I've never known anybody who this has happened to. In a lot of ways, I don't really understand why people list this as a con. The prevailing opinion in the guitar community is that there's no wrong way to play anything. However you can make the music happen works. So I don't really understand why people would say that not playing something with proper technique can be a con. Now, I do want to give a caveat to this, and that's that if you're interested in a very technically intensive kind of guitar playing, let's say you're into metal and you want to be able to shred, for example, that's a very technically intensive kind of guitar playing. For some kinds of players, technique can be more important than it is for me and for the kind of guitar playing I do. Now for the pros of getting lessons. Now the primary pro is accountability. I discussed this before, but just the fact that you have somebody holding you accountable for what you said you would learn last week and making sure that you master the steps in order is really important. Like I mentioned before, this can be really, really difficult to replace. A lot of times, just telling a friend or having somebody you know hold you accountable who's not an instructor doesn't have the same effect. Accountability is absolutely, without question, the #1 benefit to getting guitar lessons. Another benefit could be the people you meet at your guitar lessons. Going to a local lesson studio can be a great way to meet other musicians, especially if your goal is to play with a band. This can be a really effective way of meeting people. It can also be a great way of getting exposed to new music and different kinds of instruments that you weren't exposed to before. I've known plenty of guitar players who go in and they show up at a lesson studio, and then after a couple of months they're interested in drumming and they become drummers, for example, or bass players, keyboard players, whatever. This is an underrated pro to taking guitar lessons. This is one that not many people talk about, and I think it represents a major benefit. So this pro really only applies to the people who go to a local lesson studio or a local music school. It doesn't really apply very much for folks that have an instructor come to them. Maybe an instructor comes to your house to teach you. This pro really doesn't apply to those folks. Now, the final pro to taking guitar lessons is that you get a set program to improve by. So by the nature of taking guitar lessons, your instructor will take you through the steps of learning guitar. And those steps are different for everybody. I remember for me, when I was trying to teach myself, I was so concerned about trying to find the right course or the right YouTube video to watch or the right channel to follow to figure out who has the best program, who has the best curriculum about how to learn these things. The benefit to taking guitar lessons is your instructor will, by the nature of giving you guitar lessons, set out a curriculum for you. And that accountability will force you to stick with it. I think the most important thing with learning guitar is just picking a program and sticking with it. For me, I experienced a lot of decision fatigue trying to pick the best course. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of these courses cover the same thing, and even the slight differences usually aren't super meaningful. Now, the cons to taking lessons. Number one is expensive, but this is really up to you. You can spend however much money you want to spend. But in general, I think lessons cost between $200 and $300 a month these days. Another con is you're limited to the pace that your guitar instructor wants to move. Now, as you progress, this is probably going to become a good thing as you want to move too fast. But in the beginning, in my opinion, I think it's kind of a waste of time and money to go to a lesson studio for an instructor to show you some very basic concepts like how to hold a pick or a very simple open chord that you might master in a day or two, and then you have to wait, in most cases, a whole week before you can get more instruction. So I think that being limited to your instructor's pace can actually be a huge negative in most cases, especially for beginners. Another con is that many students who have instructors end up playing and sounding like their instructors. Now, this can be a good thing if you find an instructor who plays exactly in the style that you want to be playing, but for most people, your instructor is likely going to push you towards the style of playing that they know best because it's what they know how to teach best. This doesn't mean that they're a bad instructor. It doesn't mean that they're trying to deceive you in any kind of way. It just means that if you know something really well, you're going to try to show somebody else that. And if they progress in a certain way, they're going to try to show you how to progress in that certain way as well. If you teach yourself, usually there's a little more flexibility in steering yourself towards exactly the direction you want to go with your guitar playing. Now, if I was a beginner and I was trying to progress as quickly as possible, what would I do? The answer is I would do a little bit of both. I would teach myself some, and I would get some lessons. To be a little more specific, I would teach myself the basics and the fundamentals. In my opinion, there's no need to waste time or money on an instructor to teach you very simple concepts like the names of the guitars, how to tune your guitar, that kind of thing. But once I got to a certain level of proficiency, and as I began to approach that intermediate phase, I would begin looking for an instructor. Then once I got that instructor, I would want them to focus primarily on teaching me how to play songs. So much information about technique is available on the internet that you can continue to teach yourself technique. And there's still plenty of bits of technique that your instructor can teach you just through teaching you how to play songs. From there, I would just keep taking lessons until I felt like it didn't benefit me anymore. For everybody, there will be a point where taking lessons no longer benefits you. There are some people who still take an off lesson every once in a great while, and I think that's a good idea, but regularly taking lessons just doesn't become necessary after a certain point. Now, if you're interested in exactly what I would teach myself, in what order, and when I would start looking for an instructor, I suggest you check out my guitar roadmap video, which should be on the channel soon. I'll link it at the end of this video. That video will show you exactly what topics to learn, in what order, starting from the beginner phase of playing guitar, all the way up through the intermediate phase of playing guitar. I'm going to be releasing my entire beginner to intermediate guitar course here on my YouTube channel periodically. It's going to be entirely free. It'll be in order. I'm going to link it as a playlist in the description of this video, and that series of videos will focus on explaining and teaching the topics discussed in the guitar roadmap video. So, I hope this helped. Thanks for watching.